Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how you can calculate and summarize variances in Excel or Google Sheets. In this example I'm using Google Sheets and I've downloaded historical S&P 500 data going back to 1970. And so I've got the closing values and I'm going to create a column here for the daily change. And all it's going to be is taking the current day's value, dividing it by the previous day's value, and then subtracting 1, so I get the percent change. I'm going to copy this down, and then I'm also going to create a category column here. And how it's going to work is I'm going to create a lookup table that's got a change in percentage points and a category. Okay, so how the change in percentage points is going to work is I'm going to start with a really low value of minus 100%, and go down to minus 4%. Minus 2, minus 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say 5. And obviously you can change this to however you like. The idea being it's going to act as a lookup table. And then the category, I'm just going to use just letters in this example. And so that way, when it does a lookup, it returns one of these values. So to make this work, all I'm doing is a simple VLOOKUP function, selecting the value, and then I'm looking at these two columns, extracting the second one, and because I'm not looking for an exact match, I can just leave this closed as is, and Excel and Google Sheets will get the correct value. So in this example, I've got 0.49%. So how it works is because this is the values are getting larger, how the lookup is working is it's going down here and looking for 0.49. And the largest value that it can reach is this 0%, because 0.49 is not 1% or greater, so it has to stop here at 0%, extracts this value, column F, or category F. So now I can copy this down, and now you'll see for this value here, it gets category E. And the reason being is E is minus 1%, so this is smaller. This is greater than 1%, but hasn't got above 0%, so it does not reach this value. So that's why it goes to the closest value that it finds in the lookup table. And so now what I could do to do a count of all these values is do a simple COUNTIF function to say look at this category and see if it matches this value. Oops. And I can just copy this down, and now I've got a tally of all the different category counts. Now there is another way that you can do this without having to create another field, and I'm going to create another column. I'm just calling it count2 because my goal is going to be to match up these values so that they're the same regardless of which approach you take. So in this example, I'm going to start from the bottom here and use a COUNTIF function again, except this time I'm going to look at only the change column here, column C, and I'm going to use the greater than or equal operator, except I'm going to put it in quotation marks, greater than or equal to, and then use the ampersand. This way I can combine the greater than or equal to with a variable. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to 5%. And so I'm going to count everything that matches that, which is 22. So it's an exact match. Now, if I were to copy this up, this is not going to work perfectly because anything that's greater than 5% is also going to be greater than 4%. So it's going to include those values. So what I need to do is make an adjustment here. And I'm going to subtract. I'm going to use the sum function. And I'm going to use this as how you calculate a cumulative sum. So select I14 to I14 in this case. But I'm going to freeze this second value, 14, because I want it to be cumulative, so I want it to automatically expand as I move my formula up. So in this case, you know, that 50 count now is reduced by this 22, which brings this value down to 28. So now if I copy this all the way up to the top, you'll notice now my values are the same as as under this approach. And the reason being is this sum function, you'll notice, is expanding. It becomes a cumulative value. So even though, if I were just use this COUNTIF function, that's going to include the previous values. By adjusting and reducing what I've already counted before, I can get that net impact or that net change just for that specific category. So I just get that what falls within that specific range. So it's the same as doing these letters or calculating these categories by doing a lookup. So you can do this all in one step just using the COUNTIF function. The key thing to remember is you don't want to overlap and include other results that you've previously calculated, and that's where that sum function comes into play. And so now that you've got this, you can do a double check to make sure everything's accounted for. So I can just do a sum function of all this, and that gives me 13,180, which is the same for both. And I can compare that with my values in here. So I can use the COUNTA function to grab everything in column B. Now this gives me 13,182, but there's two values I'm not going to use, and those are the first two, because I don't have a category here or a category here, because I'm only starting from the second day, because obviously the first day does not have a comparable value. So if I subtract 2 from this, 13,180 matches this. So I know I've got everything accounted for, and I'm not double counting anything. And so now that you've got this, another thing you could do to add to your analysis is you can use a percent of total calculation. So, the really low values, what percentage of the total do they make up? And again, we'll freeze this bottom value here so it's always static. Convert this into percentages, and now you've got some, more data to work with as far as the different breakup in the percentages, like how many days, there were very, very low values, how many days had very large values, more than 5%, and so on. So you have a lot more data to work with once you've sort of categorized these variances, and you can see that, the bulk of the data, this adds up to 94.45%. You're looking at ranges between -2 and +1%. So a lot of that is grouped into that area. So by summarizing your variances, you can make a lot more sense of them than if you were to do, just to take a simple average. 0.04% as an average isn't really very helpful. You've got a min of -20%, got a max of 11%. That's, it's helpful to an extent, but once you break out your variances, you see a bit more information and adds a bit more value to your analysis. So that's how you can group variances in Excel. You can do it by, method 1, where you're creating an extra column and grouping these using a lookup, or you could just go straight through the COUNTIF's calculation. The main thing, again, to remember is that you're not overlapping and that you're deducting for previous values that you've already accounted for.